Good morning, everyone. So up first on the B track, we have Jonathan Tsai and William Seo. They're here to talk about their experience building a complex web application using YUI and YUI 3 and YUI 3 Gallery. So please welcome Jonathan and William.
Hi everyone. So the title of our talk today is Staying Dry with YUI. I'm Jonathan, this is William. We're from a company called Talentral. Meet the Talentral engineering team, all two of us. We actually took a huge risk in coming to the conference today because if we died in a car accident together, then our company would essentially fail. So Talentral is a career management platform which allows you to create a digital online portfolio of your work accomplishments. So kind of like visually, where from one place you're able to create, manage, and share multiple profiles. And here's our profile editor. It features a rich editor that feels like desktop, and it's WYSIWYG, so all the elements on the page you're able to edit inline without ever reloading the page. So they say that it's good to start with the end first. So I'm going to go over kind of like the main takeaways from our talk. The big idea is that we love best practices. And I coined a phrase called use, create, proliferate. What that means is that for best practices to become best practices, you want to use them a lot. And best practices by themselves can't stand, so you need to use existing best practices to create more best practices and share them with others so that it eventually gets widely adopted. And so we hereby decree that using YUI and Pure is a best practice. If you're building a modern web application, you absolutely need to be using YUI and Pure. But that in and of itself is not enough. You're also going to want to build custom YUI modules on top of that. So I'm going to tell you a little background of how we decided that these are the best practices and why we're sharing them with you today. So Talentral is a startup. We're early stage. One quote by a famous startup mentor is that he basically says that the two essential components for a successful startup are having a hacker and a hustler on your team. That could be like the CTO and a CEO. I'm the hacker of Talentral, so I'll cover the technology side and how we decided to choose this solid platform. Talentral, as you can see, is a lean startup. This is our whole engineering team up on stage. And we're hackers. At a startup, you're essentially like at an early stage startup like us, you're essentially the underdogs because everything is stacked against us, and every corner there's 100 different things that could go wrong, and mistakes are costly because if you make one bad mistake or a bad decision, it could mean the future of your company. So we can't really afford to make mistakes. And we have to make decisions carefully. A good formula for success is the saying, plan your work and work your plan. So on the planning side, we started from just an idea of what we wanted to build. We didn't have any product. We didn't even have a prototype. But we knew to build a company, you need to have a product. And one of the first, most critical decisions before you even have a product is you need to decide, what do I want to build my product with? What kind of tools? What kind of building blocks do I want to use to build the technology? And this is a very critical, important decision because once you choose that technology stack, you're pretty much married to it. You hear, like Yahoo is using PHP, Facebook is using PHP, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's like, once you use this technology stack, then you're pretty much stuck with it because it's very costly and expensive to rewrite things or to fix things. And so I came up with a list of criteria that I use to evaluate what is a good technology choice. For me, it has to be open source. It has to have good community support. Is there good documentation? Is there a community, are there forums online, mailing lists, IRC channels, whatnot? Modern means that this project, this library, technology, open source project, whatever, that I want to use supports the latest and greatest features. It supports all the latest computing standards, works with the latest devices. The next criteria is comfort, because no matter how good the technology is, if you're not comfortable with it, you're not going to be productive with it. Next is compatibility. And this is kind of like a tricky decision because once you make one decision, it kind of like when you make one decision, you're limited to your future decisions. And so with compatibility, you want to choose a technology that is widely compatible with all the other, that plays well together with everything else you're using. And finally, the criteria that I feel is very important for startups is, is there a talent fit with the technology that I'm choosing? In other words, how easily can I find and hire good talent? Because eventually we're going to all want to expand and grow our teams. Or another way to look at it is, how can I take an engineer who doesn't know this technology yet and train him to start using it? So briefly, the technology stack that Talentral is using is we're using Amazon Web Services for our servers, MySQL and Redis for storage and caching, Django and Python for our backend application layer, and YUI on the front end, along with CSS, HTML5, JavaScript, and all those goodies. So after you pick a solid technology stack, you need to work your plan and apply it correctly. So this is what the next part of its success depends on. And again, I want to bring up best practices because you want to find out what the best practices are with the specific technology that you're using to, again, use, create, and proliferate. Like the more you do this, the more you're going to find it rewarding for the technology that you've chosen, because the more you use it and the more that you customize it to your own needs, and when you start sharing with others, that really makes that initial decision, that initial technology investment worthwhile. So about using these best practices. We're at a YUI conference, so I'm not going to talk about the other technologies, but I'm going to kind of give like a case study for how we're using YUI. And first of all, is YUI a best practice? Earlier I said it is, but let's see if it passes the test. This is the YUI website. I like that it's industrial strength. Is YUI open source? Yep. Good community support? Absolutely. I want to take, I don't have enough, I can't say enough good things about the YUI community. It really is awesome. And when I think of the best open source projects on the planet, YUI is at the top, is in the top 5 of my list. Choosing YUI for your front end is a no-brainer for for us, and hopefully for many of you as well, because it's really like having, we're a team of 2, but it's really like having a team of 20 elite front-end engineers on your team, because countless times we've jumped on the IRC channel and asked a question and received really helpful responses from Ryan Grove, Tilo, and other people. Thank you. You guys know who you are. YUI is definitely modern. It's backwards compatible. Like, we're using YUI, and it supports all the way back to IE6 really well, and it's reasonably, for what we're doing, for all intents and purposes, it's modern. And there's definitely more qualified people here to address that, but I'm happy with that decision. And comfort, I used YUI a little bit before, but what Eric Ferrariolo mentioned earlier this morning is that YUI is a set of design principles that's really built on a solid foundation. So you really can't go wrong with that, and just like using YUI feels like putting on a new t-shirt. Compatibility-wise, there's no problems there, because with YUI and Pure, you can use whatever you want on the back end and other layers. And YUI is great. You have the CDN. And for talent, this is where I'm really enthusiastic about YUI, because the fact that William here is with me co-presenting today is a true testament about the power of YUI, because Talentral is actually William's first job out of college. And I'm proud to say that today he's our lead front-end engineer. And at the things, when we're working on front-end, when we're building a new front-end feature or like fixing a front-end bug, like I have over 10 years of software development experience professionally, but William is like already faster, and he's already better and faster than me after working with me for less than a year. So best practice number 1 is to use YUI. Best practice number 2 is to stay dry. Staying dry is an acronym that stands for Don't Repeat Yourself. It's a software engineering principle that encourages you to write clean, robust code so that you get to spend your time working on high leverage tasks instead of doing boring, repetitive, useless stuff. So the opposite of that is WET, which is an acronym that could stand for writing everything twice, or we enjoy typing, or copy pasting, or whatnot. Best practice number 3, JavaScript. Object-oriented JavaScript. So object-oriented programming, 2 of the principles that I like about that is abstraction and encapsulation. So part 2 of our talk is about creating best practices once you've decided to start using best practices. If you take a look at all of these 3 things, using YUI, staying dry, writing object-oriented JavaScript, you're going to find yourself asking, like, do my best practices then withstand the test of time? So a couple times we have run into one Friday afternoon, I was like panicking because like our code base was actually getting pretty unmaintainable, and I heard about Backbone, and I was like, okay, do I want to use Backbone.js? Do we want to like scrap everything, or how do I like use Backbone.js? You go to Backbone.js and they're like, okay, like Hulu is one of our biggest major users, and like so I go to Hulu website and I say, okay, this is kind of cool. Like they have like all these these objects on the page, like you can click or hover on it, you can rate the movie, you can add it to your favorites. It's a dynamic object that you can interact with, and it's really quite similar to Talentral, where on any given profile, I have hundreds of elements that I need to interact with, and it's like, okay, Is YUI still a best practice, or like did I still make the right decision? The thing is, you can't just stick with, an off-the-shelf product isn't going to work with to your specific needs, and objects don't define themselves. So you need to use, create, and proliferate. So when you combine those 3 best practices I said into one, use YUI, staying dry, and object-oriented JavaScript, this is what we came up with. You need to write your own YUI modules. So if you want to start writing your own YUI modules, where do you begin? A good place to start is the YUI documentation website, which will tell you the mechanics of how to do that. And essentially what we wanted to do, the major design principle that we wanted to follow was YUI has this object called a node. It represents a DOM node. What we wanted to be able to do was instantiate a module, pass in a node, or call a function within that module, pass in a node and have it manipulate the node or do something with the node and then spit it back out or return a new node. And how did we decide, like, when do you create a new module? Like, is it absolutely necessary? Or we found that whenever we were importing a common set of YUI modules across different JavaScript files, such as node and event and IO, that's a good point to start creating a new module. So that wasn't our first, we didn't immediately come upon this bright idea, but initially, embarrassingly, we had repeated code in a lot of places because it was fast. But over time, our needs outgrew, we weren't able to keep up with churning out features and maintaining our code base. So the next thing that we tried was using a global Y object. So the problem with this is that it's affected by the JavaScript load order. And the third thing we tried was using namespaces. And this is pretty good because it allowed us to expose JavaScript functions to expose these complex functionality to other JavaScript files. But again, the problem was that it was load order dependent. And the problem with exposing only 1 or 2 functions here or there is that you're essentially doing functional programming, which isn't object-oriented, and it still leads to a lot of repeated code. And the other problem was that it wasn't really taking advantage of the YUI loader, which allows you to dynamically load JavaScript source files and download scripts in parallel. So again, those background best practices 1 through 3 were writing custom YUI modules. And with that, I'm going to hand it off to William to demonstrate or talk about some of the modules we wrote.
Thanks, Jonathan. Hi guys, my name is William. I know please stay with us. It's almost lunchtime, so let us stay for a little longer. So I think Jonathan actually explained to us the ideas and the principles and the tools that basically help us maintain the dry code of our applications. And what I'm going to actually talk about is what we actually made using those tools and following those principles that Jonathan talked about. So first custom modules we came up with is called background fetcher. So what we wanted in our application, so we wanted to actually use the HTTP GET request and actually render the contents of the URL that's given. And we actually want to display that contents within DOM, just on a really dynamic fly. And we actually need to be able to do this multiple times in different sections of our applications. And we also have to take consideration that what if it fails? What if the URL doesn't load? How do we deal with that? Should we fire an error message? There are a lot of things that we actually have to consider. So what we actually decided to do is to utilize the y.io. Some of you might not be familiar, may be familiar, but basically use the y.io request, and using the request, and just fetch the data from the request, and we basically create a module called background fetcher using the y.io, and we came up with this function that takes the URL and types of URL. This is kind of explaining what the URI is going to basically display, and the parent, which it basically explains what the DOM, where the content is going to be displayed at, and the callback function after the URI is completely loaded or completely failed. So also, this also has a lot of other features, like we're client-side caching these the contents of the URI, and so that it actually makes a much more fast and dynamic load. We don't have to like newly fetch everything every time they ask for it. And also, if the API calls fails, then we actually have to give a automatic retry with exponential backoff. Meaning, if first time it fails, maybe try after 2 seconds. Maybe fail second time, I'll try after 4 seconds, and so on and so forth. And okay, so next example I want to talk about is unescape. So what we wanted is, our application requires a lot of editing, the dynamic editing within the DOM object, and we wanted the user to interactively edit the HTML contents just dynamically. And the first approach was to use the node.getHTML, and this is what it's like. All right, here we go. And this is one of our applications. That's me right there, guy with the red shirts. So I want you to actually get the contents of this DOM, this highlighted DOM, and just encourage users to edit it. So our first approach was to use getHTML, and this is what happens. It actually escapes the ampersand, as you guys see. And we did not want the users to see these. I was like, uh-oh, this is not good. So this was not the right approach. So I went into the IRC, YUI IRC, and basically asked, is there any else I can do? And they graciously told me this node.getText. I was like, all right, let's use this. And here we're back again. And now, ba-bam. Now we have another problem here. We actually lost the BR tag, the new line. As you guys see, all the paragraphs are clumped up together, and I was like, uh-oh, this is not a good idea either. So we had a conundrum. How should we deal with this? This is happening in multiple other places too. We actually want to unescaped the escaped HTML entities while preserving the BR tag. So what we came up with is the y.unescape. Surprisingly, on a side note, there is a y.escape, but there's no y.unescaped. So I think this is it really helps. What this actually does is get the HTML contents using the getHTML function, and basically map, just again, unescape the common HTML entities that's going to be escaped while using the getHTML function. And next example is going to be UI lock. So what we wanted, again, in our application is, in an interactive website, there are a lot of API calls going back and forth, and it's going to be happening not just one page, but like different pages using different JavaScript. And obviously, we don't want people to like log in twice or submitting the form 1 billion times, or even like when you go to eBay, when you like bid, you don't want to bid more than twice, right? So we don't want to stack these API calls, but we actually witness happening very occasionally. So in order to prevent that, we decided to basically halt or kind of lock the UI function of any buttons using the module that we created. It's called the y.UI lock, and we basically lock the button, and then we release it until the first API call is complete, so that we can actually prevent users to like just calling the API calls multiple times while the first one is already being transacted. So this is also where you unlock the button here. You give the lock and you basically return the function. That's why it's on the y.io. Use the onComplete. We actually call the functions. The y.ui lock, the io unlock returns the function. And another last example I want to point out is the spotlight. What we actually wanted is to basically node-level modal effect. There's a lot of editing going on in our application. It's a career portfolio management platform, and user wants to edit their contents freely and dynamically, but there's a lot of things going on in different places, so we actually want to like grasp the user's focus. And this is one of the examples that when your users clicks it, we actually create some we put actually layers on around the node, and we automatically calculate the width and the offset of the node based on the document body. So it encourages users to like focus like where they're at and what they're doing. So that is all for the examples that I have, and I want to just get back to Jonathan and just explain the proliferating the best practices.
Right. So we created all these cool modules. They're not quite ready yet, but we're definitely planning to open source them pretty soon. We actually found 3 categories of modules that we wrote. One is something that's for everyone. Like we feel that background fetcher would be like a module that everyone could use. There's another category would be like, well, some people might use this, and then other modules we wrote just for us because we simply found it the best way to organize code modularly. So since we're not able to share our modules just yet, we just wanted to share some of our favorite tips and tricks that you may or may not know about. Using a script tag with a content type that the browser won't parse is a great way for stashing arbitrary content in there. So like we often put like our HTML templates in there, which is really great with going along with using y.template or y.lang.sub. And that really enabled us to define our HTML templates only in one place on the server side. The next tip and trick that we like to use was, this surprisingly worked really well all the way back. I think I tested on like IE 7, but custom attributes work well. Again, like on our site with all those interactive components, where I'm able to interact with them, edit them, save them. Having to figure out the parameters to pass to your API is pretty difficult. So when you create your custom attributes and you're able to use node.get attribute to get the value of whatever you want. And so some of the favorite technologies that we used are YUI, Pure, Less, and Font Awesome. And in conclusion, best practices. The best practices are to use YUI Pure, and to really get the most out of it, you need to write your own custom YUI modules to custom tailor to your needs. Remember to use, create, and proliferate. So thanks to the YUI team and the people who put on this, and all the contributors and everyone who helped us on IRC. And here's how you can find some information about me and the company. And now, any questions?
how did you do the structure of your modules? Did you do one module per file? And if so, how did you address the HTTP overhead of having kind of a proliferation of HTTP requests per modules?
I think we did one module. We did one module per file, and then just in the file that you needed it, you would use the loader would load it. I'm not sure if that makes redundant HTTP requests. I don't know. I didn't look at that level, but I'm assuming that the browser might cache it. Maybe, maybe not. But it's like when you want to optimize your website, you want to optimize where the bottlenecks are. So that wasn't where our bottleneck is. It might be in the future. So, yeah.
We ended up spinning our own custom combinator to work around that issue. I was wondering what your experience is around that.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't run into that issue. Thank you.